Proposition Sharma wiped the perspiration from her brow as she rearranged the display of poetry collections for the third time that day. Summer in Delhi was merciless, and the ceiling fan in her bookstore turning pages did little more than circulate the hot air. Much like her financial problems, the heat was persistent and suffocating. "Madame, delivery for you." A courier stood at the entrance, holding out a sleek black envelope that seemed too formal for her modest establishment. Annika signed for it absent-mindedly, expecting another overdue notice. Inside was an invitation to meet with Rohan Singhania, CEO of Horizon Technologies, at his office the following morning. The name was familiar. His face frequently graced business magazines and national newspapers. Why would a tech billionaire want to meet with the owner of a struggling independent bookstore? Curiosity outweighed caution. The next morning, Annika wore her best kurta, deep teal with gold embroidery that her grandmother had gifted her hand, made her way to the gleaming Horizon Technologies headquarters in Gurugram. The receptionist's eyes widened slightly upon hearing her name. "Miss Sharma. Mr. Singhania is expecting you. Follow me." Annika was led through a maze of glass and steel to a corner office with panoramic views of the city. Standing by the window was Rohan Singhania, himself taller in person than in photographs, with sharp features and calculating eyes that seemed to measure everything in terms of value and utility. "Miss Sharma, thank you for coming." His voice was controlled, businesslike. "Please sit." Annika perched on the edge of an ergonomic chair that probably cost more than her monthly rent. "May I ask why I'm here, Mr. Singhania? I'll be direct." "I have a proposition for you." He sat across from her, folding his hands on the polished desk. "I need a wife." Annika nearly choked. "Excuse me, a temporary wife," he clarified, as if that made it less absurd. "For 1 year? Pursuing a merger with Patel Industries, a family-owned conglomerate with traditional values? The patriarch, Vikram Patel, has made it clear he only deals with family men who understand commitment." Annika's confusion turned to disbelief. "And you thought of me because... ... You're educated, presentable, and in need of financial assistance. Your bookstore has been operating at a loss for 3 consecutive quarters. The property tax alone? How do you know about my finances?" Annika interrupted, heat rising to her cheeks. "I make it my business to know things, Ms. Sharma." He slid a folder across the desk. "This is my offer. Marriage for 1 year. In return, all your debts will be cleared, and you'll receive 50 million rupees upon completion of the contract." Annika opened the folder with trembling hands. The document inside was meticulously detailed clauses about public appearances, social media posts, living arrangements, and the explicit absence of any romantic or physical obligations. "You expect me to agree to this?" "I expect you to be practical." Rohan's expression remained impassive. "Your bookstore will close within months otherwise. This is a business arrangement that benefits us both." Nika stood clutching the folder. "I'll need time to consider. You have until tomorrow morning." He turned back to his computer, clearly considering the meeting over. That night, Annika sat among her beloved books, the contract spread before her. The offer was financially irresistible. Her store would be saved, and she'd have security for years. But something about being purchased, even temporarily, felt hollow. At 3 a.m., she began typing a response on her laptop. By dawn, she had rewritten the entire contract. When Rohan received her email, he expected either acceptance or rejection. Instead, he found a modified agreement with unexpected additions. The marriage would proceed for 1 year. In addition to the financial terms, he would spend 3 evenings per week at her bookstore for literary engagement sessions lasting at least 2 hours. Horizon Technologies would establish a literacy foundation funding reading programs in underprivileged Delhi neighborhoods. Their public relationship must appear genuine, requiring them to learn about each other's lives, preferences, and histories. His assistant, Priya, watched as his expression shifted from shock to irritation, to something resembling respect. "Sir, what would you like me to tell Miss Sharma?" Rohan stared at the contract, a smile tugging at the corner of his mouth for the first time in weeks. "Tell her I'd like to meet again. Today." When Annika arrived, Rohan was waiting with 2 cups of chai. "No one has ever countered my terms," he said, studying her with newfound interest. "Perhaps no one has valued their time as much as their money," Annika replied, accepting the tea. "Why the literary sessions? If I'm to pretend to be your wife, I should at least know the man I'm supposedly in love with. Books reveal people, Mr. Singania, even those who don't read them." Rohan tapped his finger against the modified contract. "And if I refuse, then find someone else to play your wife." Annika met his gaze steadily. "My terms aren't negotiable." For a moment, they assessed each other, the billionaire accustomed to compliance, and the bookseller with nothing to lose but her dignity. Finally, Rohan extended his hand. "We have an agreement, Miss Sharma, or should I say Mrs. Sainia." They shook hands. Neither realized they had just started a story neither had planned to write. Terms of engagement: the wedding was a lavish but intimate affair at Rohan's farmhouse on the outskirts of Delhi. Only 50 guests attended, mostly Rohan's business associates and a few of Annika's closest friends. She had insisted on a traditional ceremony, despite the unconventional nature of their union, and Rohan had acquiesced with surprising ease. "He looked beautiful," whispered Divya, Annika's childhood friend and now her sole confidant, regarding the true nature of the marriage. "Are you sure about this? It's not too late to back out." Annika adjusted the heavy red and gold lehenga that Rohan's stylist had selected. "I'm sure. It's just business, Divya. 1 year of my life for the future of my bookstore." But as she walked around the sacred fire with Rohan, his face solemn and unreadable, behind his ceremonial sara, Annika felt a flutter of uncertainty. His hand was warm against hers as they completed the 7 faras, each step binding them together in ways that no contract could fully articulate. Their new home was Rohan's penthouse apartment in the most exclusive neighborhood in Delhi. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of the city, but the space felt sterile, chrome, glass, and white surfaces, more like a museum than a home. "Your room is through here," Rohan said, leading her down a hallway. "I've had your things moved in. My room is at the opposite end. We'll share the common spaces." The bedroom was elegant but impersonal. Ka placed a framed photo of her parents on the nightstand, the only touch of herself in the pristine environment. "Thank you," she said. "When do we begin our ... public appearances? Tomorrow, dinner with the Patels?" Rohan checked his watch. "My assistant has prepared a brief for you. Study it tonight. We need to be convincing." Annika read through the dossier on Rohan Singanaya, born to middle-class parents in Lucknow. Father died when he was 12. Graduated top of his class from IIT Delhi. Built Horizon Technologies from scratch over 10 years. No serious relationships on record. Preferred foods, clothing brands, and social causes all meticulously listed. It read like a user manual, not a description of a person. The dinner with the Patels was the first test of their charade. Vikram Patel, the patriarch, was a shrewd businessman with traditional values. His daughter Neha, now the coup of Patel Industries, was more progressive, but equally observant. "How did you two meet?" Neha asked over dessert, her eyes sharp with curiosity. They had rehearsed this. At a charity auction, Annika replied with a practiced smile. "Rohan outbid everyone for a rare first edition I wanted for my bookstore. Then gave it to her anyway," Rohan added, his hand covering Annika's, in a gesture that appeared affectionate but felt mechanical. "I was intrigued by someone who valued books more than social connections." Vikram nodded approvingly. "A man is known by the woman he chooses. You've chosen well, Rohan." Later that night, as they returned to the penthouse, Rohan loosened his tie with a sigh of relief. "You performed admirably." Vikram was impressed. "I wasn't performing," Annika said, kicking off her heels. "At least, not entirely. That story about the first edition, I would have bid on it if I could have afforded it." Rohan paused. "What book was it?" "A first edition of Tagore's Gitanjali. My father used to read it to me." She smiled faintly. "Not that you'd find it valuable in monetary terms." Something flickered across Rohan's face. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. But it vanished quickly. "Our first literary session is tomorrow evening. I've cleared my schedule. From 7 to 9, the following evening, Rohan arrived at Turning Pages precisely at 7. The bookstore had closed for regular customers, but Annika had prepared a small seating area with 2 comfortable chairs, a low table with tea, and a selection of books. "Welcome to our first session," she said, handing him a cup of masala chai. "I thought we'd start with something accessible. Short stories by Prem Chand." Rohan accepted the book with visible reluctance. "I should warn you, I haven't read fiction since school. My reading is limited to business reports and technical journals." "Then this will be educational for both of us," Annika replied. "I'll learn about the man I'm supposedly married to, and you'll remember what it's like to experience a world outside of profit margins." The first session was awkward. Rohan checked his phone constantly until Annika gently but firmly reminded him of their agreement. He read mechanically, without emotion, and answered her questions about the stories with minimal engagement. "This is pointless," he said as their time ended.
"Ow.
"Does this help either of us?"
Get patience."
"Mr. Sangnia, Rome wasn't built in a day, and neither are convincing relationships." Annika closed her book. "Thursday, same time, and please, leave. Your phone in the car next time?" The week settled into a rhythm. Public appearances as the devoted couple, business meetings where Annika played the supportive wife, and 3 evenings a week at the bookstore, where Rohan gradually, almost imperceptibly, began to engage with the books Annika selected. Their public facade was convincing enough that the merger discussions with Patel Industries progressed smoothly. Vikram invited them to weekend gatherings and family events. Tabloids ran stories about the unlikely romance between the tech mogul and the bookseller. "They're calling us Beauty and the Billionaire," Annika laughed, showing Rohan a gossip magazine during breakfast 1 month into their marriage. Rohan frowned at the headline. Ridiculous. Though they're not entirely wrong about the beauty part, the compliment caught them both off guard. Kanika busied herself with her toast while Rohan retreated behind his newspaper. The real change began during their 12th literary session. The book was The Guide by R.K. Narayan, and for the first time, Rohan didn't check the time once during their discussion. "The protagonist reminds me of my uncle," he said unexpectedly. "Always reinventing himself, finding opportunity in chaos." Annika leaned forward. "Tell me about him." "He raised me after my father died, taught me to see business as a game of strategy." A shadow crossed Rohan's face. "He died before Horizon became successful." "I'm sorry," Annika said softly. "Don't be." He would have probably tried to take control of the company. Rohan's smile was tinged with bitterness. Family is complicated. It was the first personal detail he had volunteered, the first crack in the polished facade. As they walked to his car that evening, their steps fell naturally in sync, and the silence between them felt, for the first time, comfortable rather than strained. Neither noticed the photographer across the street capturing the moment when Rohan instinctively placed his hand on the small of Annika's back to guide her into the car. Gesture too natural to be rehearsed, too intimate to be merely contractual. The following morning, Priya placed that photograph on Rohan's desk alongside the merger documents from Patel Industries. "Congratulations, sir. Mr. Patel has agreed to all our terms." She hesitated, and the Literacy Foundation has received its first major donation from an anonymous source. 50 million rupees. Rohan studied the photograph longer than the contracts. "Schedule a dinner with the Patels to celebrate, and Priya, have that rare first edition of Gitanjali located and purchased." "The one from the Christie's auction last year? Of course, sir. A gift for Mrs. Singhania?" Rohan didn't answer, his eyes still on the photograph where, just for a moment, the line between performance and reality had blurred into something neither of them had anticipated. Pages between U's monsoon season descended upon Delhi, transforming the city with torrential downpours that drummed against the penthouse windows. On these rain-soaked evenings, Turning Pages became a sanctuary of warm light and the comforting. A scent of old books mingled with cardamom tea. During their 23rd literary session, thunder crashed outside as Annika and Rohan discussed Amrita Pritam's poetry. The bookstore was empty except for them, sitting closer than usual on the old velvet couch near the back wall. "I will meet you yet again," Rohan read aloud, his voice softer than Annika had ever heard it. How and where? I know not. ... Single quotes rain lashed against the windows as he continued reading, the words filling the space between them. When he finished, he looked up to find Annika watching him intently. What? He asked, suddenly self-conscious. You've changed how? You read, she observed. You used to just say the words, now you feel them. Rohan closed the book, his fingers tracing the cover. My mother loved poetry. Pritam was her favorite. I'd forgotten until now. Tell me about her, Annika said, curling her legs beneath her. Rohan was quiet for so long that Annika thought he wouldn't answer. But then he began speaking, his eyes fixed on the rain-streaked window. She was a literature professor at Lucknow University. Brilliant, passionate about education. She would recite poetry while cooking. A faint smile touched his lips. My father was an engineer, practical, methodical. They were opposites, but somehow perfect together. What happened to her? Cancer? I was 16. His voice remained steady, but his knuckles whitened around the book. My father had already passed. My uncle took over as my guardian, convinced me that business was the only path worth pursuing. Literature was a distraction, he said. Impractical. Annika reached out, hesitated, then placed her hand over his. She would be proud of what you've built, would she? Rohan's question seemed directed more at himself than at Annika. I'm not so sure. The storm intensified, and when lightning struck nearby, the power flickered and went out, plunging the bookstore into darkness. I have candles. Somewhere, Annika said, standing carefully. Let me help. Rohan activated his phone's flashlight. Together they moved through the darkened shop, finding candles and matches behind the counter as they lit candles around the space. Creating pools of golden light, Annika noticed how different Rohan looked in this soft illumination. Less the imposing CEO and more simply a man, helping her navigate the darkness. We should probably wait out the storm, she suggested, checking her phone. The streets are flooding. They settled back on the couch with fresh tea, the candles casting dancing shadows across the bookshelves. Your turn, Rohan said unexpectedly. My turn? To share something real? All these sessions you've been asking about me. What about you? Why books? Annika considered the question, warming her hands around her teacup. My parents owned this store. They believed books could change lives, not just through education, but through empathy. Understanding someone else's story changes how you see the world. She gestured around the shop. After they died in a car accident 5 years ago, I left my corporate job to keep this place going. It wasn't a practical decision, but it was the right one. So we both lost our parents, Rohan observed quietly. Yes, but I had their books. Their voices live in everything I read. She smiled at him. That's why these sessions matter. Books connect us to others, even those who are gone. Something shifted between them that night, a wall crumbling, revealing glimpses of the people behind their carefully constructed roles. When the power finally returned and the rain subsided, neither seemed in a hurry to leave. The following week brought a surprise. Rohan arrived at the bookstore carrying a package wrapped in blue paper. This is for you, he said, his usual confidence replaced by an uncharacteristic hesitation. It's not your birthday or any occasion, just ... something I thought you should. Have. Annika unwrapped it carefully, then gasped.
House.
In her hands was a first edition of Tagore's Gitanjali, its leather binding worn but beautiful. How did you? She looked up, eyes wide. This must have cost. The price is irrelevant, Rohan interrupted. It belongs with someone who understands its value beyond money. Tears pricked at Annika's eyes as she carefully opened the book. Thank you. This means more than I can express. Rohan nodded, seemingly embarrassed by her emotion. Shall we begin today's session? That night, after Rohan had left, Annika discovered a folded note tucked between the pages of Gitanjali. In precise handwriting were the words, "Some gifts cannot be measured in rupees." Thank you for reminding me of that. Meanwhile, the literacy foundation Rohan had established was flourishing. What had begun as a contractual obligation had expanded into multiple programs across Delhi's underserved communities. Horizon Technologies employees volunteered as reading tutors, and local authors were invited to give talks at schools. During one such event, Anika watched from the back of a classroom as Rohan sat on a too small chair, reading to a group of wide-eyed children. He did different voices for each character, his usual reserve completely abandoned. When a small girl climbed into his lap to see the pictures better, he didn't miss a beat, simply adjusting the book so she could see. Later, walking back to the car, Anika said, "You're good with children. I wouldn't have expected that." Rohan looked surprised. "I enjoy their honesty. Children don't care about stock prices or market share. They just want a good story. What about you? What do you want, Rohan?" The question hung between them, weighted with possibilities neither had anticipated 6 months ago. Before he could answer, his phone rang Vikram Patel with urgent news about the merger. The moment passed, but the question remained unanswered, but not forgotten. As their first anniversary approached, their lives had become genuinely intertwined. Rohan now kept books on his nightstand. Anika had her own office at Horizon Technologies, where she managed the Literacy Foundation.
Edited.
Events together not because the contract demanded it, but because it felt natural. The penthouse had transformed as well. Anika's books now filled the previously empty shelves. Colorful throws softened the stark furniture. Family photos hers, and gradually his adorned the walls. What had been a showcase had become a home. One evening, as they prepared dinner, together another new habit, Rohan received an email confirming that the merger with Patel Industries was officially completed. All conditions had been met. The contract that had brought them together had served its purpose. "We should celebrate," Anika said, raising her wine glass. "Congratulations." Rohan clinked his glass against hers, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. Yes, everything according to plan. Later that night, Anika found Rohan standing by the windows, looking out at the city lights. She stood beside him, close enough to feel his warmth, but not touching. "The year's almost up," she said quietly. "Contract will end next week, yes." A single word, revealing nothing of what he felt. And then Rohan turned to face her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "And then, as agreed, you'll receive the final payment. The bookstore will be yours, free and clear. You'll be free. Free." The word should have brought relief. Instead, it felt like loss. "Is that what you want?" Anika asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Rohan's phone chimed with a message. He glanced at it, then straightened. "The Patels have invited us to dinner tomorrow to celebrate the merger. We should maintain appearances until everything is finalized." He walked away, leaving Anika alone with the city lights and the growing realization that what had begun as pretense had become, for her at least, something real. Something she wasn't ready to let go. What she didn't see was Rohan in his study, staring at the calendar with the contract end date circled in red. A glass of whiskey in his hand and the collected works of Amrita Pritam open on his desk, bookmarked. To the poem he had read aloud that rainy night, "I will meet you yet again." Breaking point, the celebration dinner at the Patel's ancestral home was an extravagant affair. Crystal chandeliers illuminated tables laden with gourmet dishes, while waitstaff moved silently among Delhi's business elite. Rohan and Anika played their parts flawlessly, the power couple whose partnership had facilitated one of the year's biggest mergers. "Two new beginnings," Vikram Patel declared, raising his glass. And to the Singanayas, whose union convinced me that Rohan was more than just a brilliant mind, he's a man with a heart. Nika felt Rohan tense beside her. His fingers sought hers under the table, squeezing gently before withdrawing. "Thank you for your faith in us," Rohan responded smoothly. "This merger represents the future of both our companies." Later, as music played and couples danced, Neha Patel approached Anika by the dessert table. "You've done the impossible," she said, watching Rohan across the room. "The merger?" Anika selected a small rosewater pastry. "No," Nia smiled knowingly. "Transforming the infamous Rohan Singhania. Before you, he was all sharp edges and cold calculation. My father wouldn't have considered a partnership with the man he was a year ago." Anika kept her expression neutral. "People change when they find what matters to them. And you matter to him." Neha observed. It's evident in how he looks at you. When he thinks no one notices. Before Annika could respond, Rohan appeared at her side. May I steal my wife for a dance? On the dance floor, he held her with practiced ease. The result of the ballroom dancing lessons they'd taken for a charity gala months ago. Yet something was different tonight. A tension in his shoulders, a careful distance in his eyes. Wrong? Annika asked quietly. Nothing. Everything is proceeding according to plan. His voice was controlled, professional. The merger documentation will be finalized tomorrow. That's not what I meant. Rohan's jaw tightened. We should discuss our transition plan. The contract ends in 5 days. Is that all this is to you? A contract? The words escaped before she could stop them. His steps faltered almost imperceptibly. It was always a contract, Annika. We both knew that. The drive home was silent, the gap between them widening with each passing kilometer. Back at the penthouse, Annika kicked off her heels and headed straight for her room, but Rohan's voice stopped her. Priya has prepared the final transfer documents. Your payment will be processed on Monday. Annika turned slowly. I don't want your money. It's what we agreed to. Rohan loosened his tie, not meeting her eyes. Your bookstore is secure. The Literacy Foundation will continue under Horizon's management. Our arrangement has been mutually beneficial? Our arrangement? Annika's voice rose. Is that what you called the past year of our lives? An arrangement? What would you call it? His tone was carefully measured. I don't know anymore. She ran a hand through her hair in frustration. But it became more than a business transaction somewhere between the guide and Gitanyali, didn't it? Or was I the only one who felt that? Rohan's expression shuddered. Feelings complicate things. We had an agreement with clear parameters. Parameters. Annika laughed bitterly. Like the parameters of you reading 2 children for hours? Or cooking dinner together? Or calling me from Hong Kong at midnight just to tell me you saw a bookstore that reminded you of mine? Those were ... adaptations to make our situation convincing. Convincing to whom, Rohan? The Patels? The public? She stepped closer. Or to yourself. Something flashed in his eyes, vulnerability quickly masked by defiance. What do you want from me, Annika? The truth. Just once. Without calculations or strategic considerations. The silence stretched between them, taut with unspoken words. Finally, Rohan exhaled sharply. The truth is irrelevant. The merger is complete. Our contract has served its purpose. He turned away. I have an early meeting tomorrow. Annika watched him retreat down the hallway, his shoulders rigid. She had glimpsed the man behind the billionaire's mask over the past year, had seen him laugh, reflect, and grow. But now the mask was firmly back in place, and she didn't know how to reach him. The next morning, Rohan was gone before she woke. A note on the kitchen counter informed her he would be in Mumbai for 2 days. It was signed R. Singhania, formal, distant, as if the past months had never happened. That afternoon, Annika buried herself in work at the bookstore, reorganizing shelves that didn't need reorganizing. Divya found her there, surrounded by stacks of novels. What happened? Divya asked, taking in Annika's red-rimmed eyes. The contract ends Monday. Annika shelved a book with unnecessary force. Everything goes back to normal. Normal? Divya raised an eyebrow. You mean you living above? The bookstore. Eating instant noodles and worrying about electricity bills. That was my life before and now. Annika's hands stilled on a book spine. Now, I don't know what my life is, or what I want it to be. Liar. Divya leaned against the bookshelf. You know exactly what you want. You're just afraid he doesn't. Want the same thing? That evening, instead of returning to the penthouse, Annika went to her old apartment above the bookstore. The space felt small and neglected after months of disuse, but it was touched by Rohan Singhania's influence as she prepared a simple dinner. Her phone buzzed with a message from Priya. Mr. Singhania has extended his Mumbai trip until Monday. He asks if you need anything. Not sends his love or even hopes you're well. Clinical, detached. Annika didn't respond. The weekend passed in a blur of inventory and accounting at the bookstore. On Sunday evening, she received another message, this time from Rohan directly, arriving 10 a.m. tomorrow, meeting with lawyers at 11 to finalize dissolution of our arrangement. A car will pick you up at 9:30. Dissolution. As if their marriage had been nothing more than a business merger itself, Annika typed and deleted 5 different responses before settling on, "I'll be there." That night, she couldn't sleep. She paced her small apartment, thoughts racing. By dawn, she had made a decision at 9:15 Monday morning. Instead of waiting for Rohan's car, Annika took a taxi to Horizon Technologies. She bypassed the reception desk with the security pass. She still carried and headed straight for Rohan's office. Priya looked up in surprise as Annika entered the executive suite. "Mrs. Singanaya, Mr. Singanaya isn't back yet. His flight, No, I need access to his office." Priya hesitated, then nodded. "Of course." Inside the minimalist space, Annika placed an envelope on Rohan's desk, prominently displayed where he couldn't miss it. Then she removed her wedding ring, a stunning diamond piece. Selected by Rohan's stylist stand, placed it beside the envelope. She was walking out when she noticed something new on the credenza. Behind his desk, a framed photograph of the two of them at the Literacy Foundation launch, both laughing as a child handed them a thank you drawing. It was the only personal item in the otherwise sterile office. Annika paused, her resolve wavering. Then she straightened her shoulders and left without looking back. At 10:30, Rohan entered his office, looking exhausted from his Mumbai trip. He stopped abruptly when he saw the ring and envelope. With a sense of foreboding, he opened it to find not the expected signed contract dissolution, but a handwritten letter. "Rohan, I'm returning the ring that sealed our business arrangement. I will not be attending the meeting with the lawyers today. There is nothing left to dissolve. The terms of our contract have been fulfilled. The merger is complete. You got what you wanted, what you didn't stipulate in your carefully worded agreement was what would happen if either of us changed during our year together. If our literary sessions became more than contractual obligations, if your literacy foundation became more than a public relations exercise, if your penthouse became our home, if pretending to love became something else entirely, you once told me that business is about calculated risks. I took a risk with you not just financially, but with my heart. It appears the investment wasn't mutual. I don't want your money. I want what I've always wanted, authenticity, life filled with meaning, and truth. For a while, I thought that life might include you. The bookstore will remain open. The memories it holds are worth more than any financial security. The story of us will remain there too, shelved somewhere between fiction and reality. Goodbye." Rohan, Anakarahan, read the letter twice, his hands uncharacteristically unsteady. He reached for his phone to call her, then stopped, staring at the photograph on his credenza. Outside his office, Priya watched through the glass partition as her always composed employer sat motionless. A letter clutched in one hand, the weight of unspoken truths visible in the slump of his shoulders. The door to the lawyer's conference room opened. "Mr. Singhania, we're ready to begin. Is Mrs. Singhania joining us?" Rohan looked up, his expression unreadable. "No," he said quietly. "She's not coming." Rewritten destiny rain pounded against the windows of turning pages as Annika tallied the day's modest sales. 2 weeks had passed since she'd left the letter in Rohan's office. 2 weeks of silence, of returning to her life before the contract, before the marriage, before him. The bookstore had been unusually busy, though. Word had spread about the Literacy Foundation's success, drawing curious customers who stayed for the atmosphere and left with books. It wasn't financial security, but it was sustainability, something Annika had fought for years to achieve. Closing time, she announced to the last lingering customer, an elderly man browsing poetry collections. "Just a moment more," he requested, selecting a volume of Tagore before approaching the counter. "You've created something special here. A sanctuary." "Thank you." Annika smiled, ringing up his purchase. "That's exactly what I've always wanted it to be." After he left, she locked the door and flipped the sign to closed, then paused as headlights illuminated the rain-streaked windows. A sleek black car had pulled up outside Rohan's car. Her heart stuttered as the driver's door opened. But it was only Priya who emerged, hurrying through the rain with an envelope clutched to her chest. Mrs. Miss Sharma, Priya corrected herself, dripping water onto the wooden floor. I apologize for coming after hours. It's fine. Annika gestured to a chair. Would you like some tea? You're soaked. No, thank you. I can't stay. Priya handed her the envelope. Mr. Singhania asked me to deliver this personally. Kana took it, her fingers trembling slightly. Is it the divorce papers? I'm not authorized to discuss its contents. Priya's professional demeanor softened. But I believe you should read it promptly. After Priya left, Annika stared at the envelope for a long moment before opening it. Inside was not legal documentation, but a single sheet of Horizon Technologies letterhead with Rohan's precise handwriting. Annika, I am not a man of poetry or flowery sentiments. I build systems, analyze data, and make strategic decisions. Emotions have always been variables I couldn't quantify, so I eliminated them from my equations. Then you rewrote my contract. You asked for truth, so here it is. I am terrified. It's not a failure or financial loss. Those are manageable risks. I am terrified of this unquantifiable feeling that has grown between us. Of wanting something I never planned for. Of needing someone when I've built my life on needing no one. The merger is complete, but I am not. Something fundamental has shifted, and I don't know how to process it except to say that the penthouse feels empty without your books, without your laughter. Without you, I don't want to dissolve what we've built. Not the Literacy Foundation, not our literary sessions. It's not us. If you're willing, I'd like to propose a new agreement. No lawyers, no contracts. Just us, figuring out what's real and what's possible. I'll be at the place where this all began, my office, tomorrow at 7 p.m. Come if you want to start a new chapter. If not, I'll understand and the bookstore will remain yours. No strings attached. Rahanika read the letter 3 times, tears blurring the words on the third reading. It was the most honest communication she'd ever received from Himra. Vulnerable, entirely unlike the calculated businessman she'd first met. She slept fitfully that night, the letter on her nightstand. By morning, she'd made her decision. At 7:15 p.m. the following evening, Rohan stood by the window in his office, watching the city lights emerge as dusk settled over Delhi. He'd sent everyone home early, even Priya, for the first time in his career. Horizon Technologies had emptied while its CEO remained. He checked his watch again. 15 minutes late. Perhaps she wasn't coming. Perhaps he'd finally miscalculated beyond recovery. The sound of the elevator arriving made him turn. Footsteps approached, lighter than a security guard's, more purposeful than a cleaner's. His office door opened, and there she was. Annika wore a simple blue kurta, the same one she'd worn to their first meeting a year ago. Her hair was loose around her shoulders, and she carried a book. Came, Rohan said, his usual eloquence deserting him. I did. She remained by the door, neither advancing nor retreating. Your letter was unexpected, but honest? Yes. She studied him. Honesty looks good on you, Rohan Singhania. He took a careful step toward her. I meant every word. I believe you. Annika moved into the office, placing the book she carried on his desk. It was the first edition of Gitanjali he had given her, but I need to know what happens next. What do you actually want? Rohan considered the question with the same intensity. He applied to business decisions, but his answer came from somewhere deeper than strategic thinking. I want what I didn't know I was missing until you showed me. Evenings discussing books instead of acquisitions. Mornings with someone who challenges me instead of agrees with me. A partner, not an employee or an asset. He met her gaze directly. I want you, Annika. Not as a contract or an arrangement. Just you. And if I want the same? Her voice was steady, but her eyes revealed her vulnerability. How do I know this isn't another calculated move? The merger is done, but maybe you've found other uses for a wife who humanizes the ruthless CEO. It was a fair question, one that cut to the heart of his reputation and his fear. Rohan moved to his desk and unlocked the bottom drawer. From it, he withdrew a manuscript bound in leather. He had been working on this since Mumbai. He handed it to her. No one else has seen it. Annika opened the cover to find a title page, Beyond Calculation, A Businessman's Journey Through Literature. Below it was Rohan's name and a dedication for AS, who taught me that not everything of value can be measured. She flipped through pages filled with Rohan's reflections on the books they'd read together. How they'd changed his perspective on his company, his relationships, his life. It was deeply personal, vulnerable in a way the public Rohan Singhania had never been. You wrote this, every word. He took a breath. I'm publishing it under my name. The entire business world will know that Rohan Singhania, the man who built an empire on cold logic, found something more valuable through poetry and fiction. Through you. Annika closed the manuscript, understanding the magnitude of what he was offering. Not just private feelings, but public acknowledgement of transformation. For a man defined by his uncompromising business acumen, it was the equivalent of standing naked in a crowded room. That's quite a risk, she said softly. It's the greatest one I've ever taken. Rohan moved closer, close enough that she could see the uncertainty in his eyes. But you taught me that some risks are worth taking. Outside, Delhi continued its evening. Rhythm horns honking, lights glowing, lives intersecting. Inside the quiet office, two people stood at a crossroads of their own making. Annika placed the manuscript on the desk and reached for his hand. I think we need a new contract. Rohan's expression faltered. I thought, not that kind of contract. Her lips curved into a smile. A marriage. A real one this time. Relief and joy transformed his face. Are you proposing to me, Annika Sharma? I'm suggesting we write our own story? She intertwined her fingers with his. No predetermined ending. No exit clauses. Just two people choosing each other day after day. Instead of answering with words, Rohan drew her into his arms and kissed her not for cameras or business partners or public perception, but for themselves alone. In that kiss was the acknowledgement of what had grown between them. Something that had begun as pretense but had rooted itself in truth. When they finally separated, Rohan rested his forehead against hers. Is that a yes? It's a beginning, Annika answered, her eyes bright with tears and laughter. The best kind of story doesn't end with happily ever after. It continues, page after page, chapter after chapter. 6 months later, Turning Pages had expanded into the vacant space next door. The new section housed a cafe and community reading room, funded not by Horizon Technologies, but by proceeds from Rohan's best-selling memoir. 3 evenings a week. The cafe hosted literary discussions led by Rohan and Annika together, drawing people from across Delhi. Their actual weddings, small, intimate, and entirely genuine, had taken place in the bookstore, surrounded by the stories that had brought them together. Vikram Patel had attended, laughing that his business instincts had been right all along about what Rohan needed. The penthouse had transformed further Rohan's minimal aesthetic, now harmoniously blended with Annika's warmth. His technical journals shared shelf space with her poetry collections, evidence of two lives becoming one. On their first true anniversary, Rohan presented Annika with a unique gift. A leather-bound book with blank pages and a title embossed in gold, The Stories We Choose. For our future chapters, he explained as they sat together on their balcony, the Delhi sunset painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. To be written together, Nika opened to the first page, where Rohan had already written an inscription. Some contracts bind with legal terms. Some stories end where they begin. But the greatest journey I've known started when you rewrote mine. It's beautiful, she said, leaning against his shoulder. Who knew the ruthless Rohan Singhania had poetry in him all along? I didn't, he admitted, his arm tightening around her. It took a bookseller with impossible terms to show me. Below them, the city pulsed with millions of stories unfolding, some just beginning. Others reaching climactic moments, still others finding unexpected resolutions. Among them was theirs, a tale of two people who had entered an arrangement with clearly defined parameters, only to discover that the most valuable things in life existed in the margins between the lines. Beyond calculation, as night fell over Delhi, they remained together on the balcony, planning their next chapters in quiet conversation, not as characters following a predetermined plot, but as authors of their own shared story, writing each page with intention, truth, the kind of love that no contract could ever contain.